we're going over the 7 most dangerous commanders in the format and their decks.
I'm Mia, and I like drinking coffee at night.
I'm Beezy. I eat my potato chips in order from biggest to smallest. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Moxfield, but not yet. There's an ad somewhere. You can guess where it is. You will be wrong, but feel free to try. Sometimes it's fun to just try things. Also, Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
You can actually use code
NERDS
at checkout when you use our link in the description to save yourself 5% on the order. So if you're going to order sleeves from Dragon Shield, why not just use our link, spend less dollars, and you can get cool new sleeves like the Bloomborough-themed Spirit Animal sleeves.
I love those ones so much. Ladybug with Teeth is definitely my favorite. We're also sponsored by Card Kingdom. That is the best place to buy things like singles, doubles, triples, sealed product, pre-cons that are already sealed, all of the above. You can get all of that at Card Kingdom. And if you want to check out what we're recommending and see our faces on the site, use our link below. Tell them we sent you. It's an awesome way to support the channel. Plus, we have a Patreon. Do you have a stinky deck? Do you like gameplay? Do you like random stuff like our podcast where we talk about things that we can't talk about on the show? Look no further than Patreon. There are a ton of tiers, a little bit for everyone.
Yes, but today we've got the 7 most dangerous commanders in the format. But you might be wondering, what does dangerous mean? We always like to define our terms here on this channel. That's a very helpful step in the communication process. So we're going to define dangerous for you. Dangerous means presenting an immediate threat to you and/or your board. Oftentimes, the game will be impacted simply by the knowledge that these commanders are in the command zone. So we're looking for an immediate threat. If this thing hits the field, basically you're screwed if the conditions are met for whatever the deck's trying to do. And usually, you knowing that the person, your opponent, is playing that commander is going to change how you play the game.
These are big, these are impactful, these will worry you. So let's start off with the first one. Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite, or Mommy. 5 white, 4/7 with Vigilance. Other creatures you control get +2/+2. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. This is a gigantic swing of the board, which can make your poultry 1/1s into 3/3s and make their gigantic creatures into almost nothing.
Yeah, the power and toughness deficit, the ratio, the switch, one of those words is right, is so huge that your 1/1s now trade with what used to be their 5/5s. They both even out to 3/3s. This thing destroys board states. If it sticks out, certain decks cannot win the game, and that also leads to, if Elesh Norn is in someone's command zone, I have to play the entire game with that in mind, because any 2/2s or 1/1s I have in play evaporate if Elesh Norn hits the field.
I mean, there are some decks that just fold to this. I remember playing against this with my Edgar Markov deck, and I didn't have enough things to buff on the board, so all my vampire tokens were like dying immediately. This is tough to get around, especially if you are a deck that makes a lot of 1/1s or 2/2s.
Plus, even if you kill Elesh Norn, that's all fine and dandy, but she's still got her static effect to resolve in some way, so all of the 2/2s are gone. You can't have Elesh Norn hit the field and not lose all of your weak creatures. So it is a devastating card, to be sure. I mean, we haven't even hardly mentioned that. Also, half the time it's played, it just ends the game because of the +2/+2. So here are some of the cards you're going to see alongside Elesh Norn. One of the most annoying, for sure, is Mother of Runes. It just can give a creature protection from a color. So now that this thing comes down very early, oftentimes turn 1 or 2, as soon as Elesh Norn hits, you not only have the problem of Elesh Norn, but how are you even going to get rid of it? Because Mother of Runes is backup for removal you might have.
You just have to keep chaining removal and removal to try and get it off the field. But if they have this plus like Giver of Runes, for instance, you're going to have a tough time breaking through to that Elesh Norn. The next one is Rumor Gatherer. Whenever another creature enters, scry 1. If this is the second time it's resolved, draw a card instead. This helps you get your engine going because you want to make a bunch of little creatures in the early game, slap down Elesh Norn, make them all really, really big. But since you're going to be slapping down so many little creatures, you're going to be able to draw cards and get your engines kind of going really early.
Yep, all of your early game little stuff is needed so that when you play Elesh Norn, it has a big impact and you can deal a bunch of damage. And then you also need to make sure that you're still hitting your land drops and stuff. So with Rumor Gatherer, it's great because it's a little dude and it wants you to play more little dudes. And when you do that, oftentimes 2 at a time, even on other people's turns, you get to start drawing cards. Also, Adeline, Resplendent, and Cathar is a great way to just stack up extra dudes as your opponents don't have blockers or can't block. If you attack, you get 3 things basically extra. Probably 2 of them are going to die, but she just kind of profits 1 or 2 every go around, and she's just huge.
I mean, Adeline is an army in a can. This card alone is annoying where people might waste their removal for Elesh Norn on this because it's just so impactful and gets so big and just makes so many bodies. Adeline is such a good card.
Yeah, one of the annoying play patterns with Adeline is they'll play like a Mother of Runes on turn 1, then on turn 3, it's still pretty early in the game, especially if some people haven't even taken their turn 3 yet. So then when they play Adeline, they can just go, all right, attack the player with no creatures yet, get all my tokens, probably profit all of them, and just start making Adeline like a 5/4 now already.
The next one is Oketra's Monument. White creature spells cost 1 less to cast, but that's most of your deck, so it won't be a problem. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you create a 1/1 warrior with vigilance. You're just going to be chaining into creatures left and right. You're already trying to make a bunch of small creatures to pump when Elesh Norn gets bigger, so why not have that come in with an extra 1/1 vigilance too? That's really, really nice to have once they get pumped.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine with a cost reduction of 1 on all of your creatures to cast 2 creature spells in a turn. And if you can pull that off, it basically means this is like a 3-mana rock that taps for 2 or more every turn and just spits out 1/1s that, of course, later will become ginormous. Now, one of the things about Elesh Norn that you really have to play around when you play against it is you have to be careful when your opponent just kind of passes the turn in the mid to late game with very little to do, seemingly, right? So that usually means they're going to go end step, make a bajillion tokens, untap, play Elesh Norn. Oops, if your defenses are down now, you just lost the game. And that's part of like the face-up threat of Elesh Norn. It's part of why she's so dangerous. If you make a blunder like that and you go, well, they don't have anything, they're going to fire off Call the Copper Codes. They're going to strive it twice. They're going to make X tokens for each creature you guys control, basically. And then, oops, now all of a sudden they have, 12 1/1s they didn't have before, which become 3/3s and someone's dead.
I mean, 1/1s are the biggest danger in this deck because what's another 1/1? Well, it's going to kill you in the end.
Another similar effect that also has defensive applications is Grand Crescendo. You can fire this off on the end step to make a bunch of surprise dudes, but if you're ahead and you're already beating face with Elesh Norn, you can dodge board wipes by just playing this for white or spending whatever extra mana you have to get dudes.
Is this controversial? But I think Grand Crescendo is underrated. I don't see it as much as I think I should.
I feel like I never see it. I feel like
it's a good card, though.
Yeah, it's on par with some of the other ones that are like board wipe protection. And I think it's definitely better than like Boros Charm. I mean, we're talking about mono white here, but I don't know. Maybe I should see Grand Crescendo more. Maybe I need to be the change I want to see.
I mean, you do have a lot of tokens in Oketra. And the next one is Clever Concealment. I love this because it has Convoke, and you're going to have a bunch of little guys you can Convoke this out for. And any number of target non-land permanents you control phase out.
This is the groan test. Because even if you jump through all the hoops and, you can answer their Mother of Runes and you can... you have a board wipe to deal with their bombardment of tokens, but the board wipe is like Toxic Deluge, so they can't even crescendo you. Well, Elesh Norn has Vigilance, and some of the warrior tokens you're making have Vigilance. Adeline has Vigilance. A lot of white creatures with Vigilance, meaning they can send them all in and leave up no mana. You go for the board wipe, you feeling great, and then they go tap 4 creatures, and you're just like, oh no. Then they save all of their creatures and just beat the crap out of you on their next turn.
All of their non-land permanents will be gone, so in theory this might be great if you can play something hasty and swing in for damage, but I don't think it will be enough to kill them.
Yeah, it's really tricky. Elesh Norn's got a lot of tricks up her sleeve, and I love the combination of immediate, huge, sweeping board impact, and you have to play around this card. You have to play with Elesh Norn in mind, or... I mean, you think you're just like 10% less likely to win. That's some large percentage more likely to lose by just ignoring Elesh Norn. Like, if you don't play around it, you'll get blown out by it.
You really will, especially with the large boards. Just watch out for it. The next card is Slicer, Hired Muscle. 4 red for a 3/4 with more than meets the eye, which means you could cast it for 2 and a red, but on its backside. Double Strike Haste. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you can have them gain control of Slicer until end of turn. If you do, you untap it, you goad it, and it can't be sacrificed this turn. If you don't, you convert it. On the backside is a 3/2 First Strike Haste. When it deals combat damage to a player, convert it at the end of combat. This thing hits like a truck, and I don't mean that as a joke. This is very, very easy to get your Voltron commander damage kills in. I've seen people die turn 3, even 4, like multiple players out at that point because this thing hits so hard.
Yeah, it doesn't actually look like it does that. And I think what you're describing is not unreasonable with the Slicer decks with Slicer as the commander. I think this card maybe is a little deceptive to read because when players sort of like sleeve up their commanders, you can see Slicer, the front side, but they're never going to play the front side. Slicer is actually always 3 mana because that's the side that's cheaper. And when you hit someone, it just converts to the 5 mana side. And now all of a sudden you have to deal with Slicer hitting someone, maybe you, every single turn over and over and over. And sometimes it's best in the best interest of players to leave Slicer around. And this could definitely lead to like sort of feel bad scenarios where you kind of die early because you didn't plan around it or you kept a hand that has no way to deal with Slicer. I think that's one of the things that makes Slicer the most dangerous. If you see a Slicer deck at the table, you better mulligan extra to find some piece of removal, because if you don't, you might just lose.
It really is. It's so easy to get to 21 with this. If there's any ways to put counters on him, he already has double strike on his front side, so already that's a chunk of your life being gone with one hit of him, or one attack at least. And it's very easy, especially if there's like extra combats, or if multiple people say, oh, well, you don't have a blocker this turn, and all your opponents swing at you, you'll be out very soon.
Yeah, and the reason you were talking about being dead or almost dead on turn 3 is because of the red cards like Simian Spirit Guide. It's not that great, but it trades resources for mana and saves you time. So if you can get Slicer out a turn sooner, that's like an extra 6 damage that somebody's going to be taking. Well, actually, no. The sooner you cheat Slicer out, the more entire rotations you get of a 3/4 hitting somebody for 6 3 times. So we really, really want to get him out turn 1 or 2. And there's actually a bunch of like red cheaty ways to kind of do that. Desperate Ritual is the other one, and there's plenty of rituals. They're just, you have to go down a card, but you go up a mana or up 2 mana, and that stuff lets you play Slicer on turn 1 or 2 kind of consistently.
Another card in here that just makes his power grow so much is Strength Testing Hammer. Comes down for 1, but equips for 3. When the equipped creature attacks, you roll a 6-sided dice. It gets +X+O until end of turn, where X is the result. Then, if it had the greatest power or is tied for the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield, draw a card. This keeps the Slicer player refilling their hand, getting in for so much more damage, and even if it rolls a 1 or a 2, that's still, with the double strike side, that's 2 or 4 damage, and if it hits 6, you might just be dead.
Yeah, the real bummer of this card, if you're the opponent, is they can play Slicer on turn 3, with no shenanigans. They hit somebody, they convert it. Then on turn 4, 1 minute to play this, 3 mana to equip, and it is a disaster. They control the equipment, even though the control of Slicer passes around. So they're still drawing cards each time when Slicer is forced to attack, gets bigger. The average roll of a D6 is 3 or 4. So Slicer's going to be hitting for 6 double strike or 7 double strike. That's like 2 hits and you're dead. It's kind of silly how fast this commander can throw damage on you. Even if like a chump blocker could be the difference between you dying or living to having another removal spell.
But who cares about chump blockers if it has Commander's Plate on it?
Yep.
Because at that point, it has protection from everything not in its color identity, which is almost everything at that point.
Yeah, if you can slap down Commander's Plate, which I think is also 1 to play, 3 to equip, I just don't know what you're supposed to do. I think this video might be an inadvertent ad for like Soul Shatter, because that's like the only way to get rid of some of the stuff we're talking about.
It is. Plus Commander's Plate, I forgot, also gives extra stats, so you're going to be dying even sooner if Commander's Plate is on it.
Like almost immediately.
Built to Smash, also, it gets target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If it's an artifact creature, which it is, it gets Trample. This can be the difference between living and dying with that Trample, because it doesn't matter if you have a chump blocker or 2 or 5 at that point, depending on their stats, because Slicer will just be way too big for that to even matter.
I love this card because this card is trash, and I love that it is so especially brutal in this deck because it represents an extra 6 damage of commander plus whatever would spill over from the trample that wouldn't have been spilling over normally. So this thing can easily represent 10 damage, and when you only have 3 opponents who are all already trying to play hot potato, attacking each other with the stupid Slicer, it really can just kill somebody. And I think as a Slicer player, once you can KO one player, your win percentage has to go way up, because now there's only 2 people left. They have to go at each other no matter what. And you can sort of use your turn with Slicer to pick up the pieces and take out whoever you want.
I think Slicer's also a very interesting one. This is not an ad for Slicer as a deck. I just wanted to put this in. I think you could build Slicer very easily as a budget deck that is incredibly powerful. Sure, you'll be playing Archenemy the entire time, but if you take out some of the more expensive rituals and like Commander's Plate, I think you can still build this very cheaply and very well.
Yeah, like what's built to Smash? -5 cents. I think you could really get something going. I think also another budget card that just kind of works with this deck is Shiny Impetus. Gives it +2/+2, huge stat boost with double strike, and now whenever it attacks, which is 4 times a turn cycle, you get a treasure, which really adds up, and I think you don't even have to spend those, because you're playing Protect the Queen on Slicer, so you can just use that mana if someone tries to kill it to play like a Will's Reversal or a Bolt Bend or something. But barring that, every once in a while Slicer's going to get taken out to something weird, like a Soul Shatter. If that happens, now you get a bunch of treasures to just play them again.
And Bedlam is also the card to play in here, because creatures can't block. If that goes out, you're just basically dead if you can't find removal. Just taking it all to the face, that's rough.
It's not hard to imagine you're playing against Slicer, and you think you're safe with these 2 Llanowar Elves you have, the chump block, and you go like, all right, okay, I don't have removal, but then they go Bedlam. And now they attack somebody for free for 6 to commander damage. Then it goes back. That person can deal 6 commander damage to whoever they want. Then it goes back again, 6 more, and that could mean you just die without ever having seen this coming. And that's why I think if you're playing against Slicer, pack a removal spell. You have to.
I think Bedlam's also interesting because if you play it with Giant Impetus, which we just mentioned, you can like play it basically for free and then keep up the mana to have protection for Slicer anyways. You're just basically just saving so much mana. It's just chains together in something so nasty.
Okay, and actually before we move on, the things I've been talking about are extra brutal because Slicer says he can't be sacrificed when you get control of him, so a Soul Shatter won't even work after he's been exchanged. So like there's no hope. You got to figure something out. Maybe I think you can do it in response to the trigger, but it's rough out here. It is really rough. We're going to go to the next commander. It is a card maybe you've heard of. Nadu, Winged Wisdom, 1 blue-green for a 3/4 flyer. Creatures you control have, quote, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal a top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn. Nadu is a house, a machine, a card advantage fiend. And if you are not careful and you pass the turn to a Nadu, there's a very good chance you won't have another turn to pass.
Only twice a turn? I mean, this card must be trash then. But for real, though, that is not a limitation in the slightest. Each of your creatures get that. And it just snowballs out of control. The game turns into a keep away with the Nadu, and if you can't keep it off the field, you will lose. It's just so much value. One of the ways that Nadu players love to do this is with Shuko. This basically says it equips for free, so you can keep targeting all of your creatures and getting all of the value, and when you play more creatures, you'll get more value and target it again. And that's why if you see any videos with Shuko and Nadu out, you're just going to see the piles of like targeted once, targeted twice, targeted 0 times.
Yeah, the thing about Nadu is the proactive game plan is so powerful that you just can't pass the turn to a Nadu player with Nadu in play and not have some kind of serious plan. And when they can target something for free, the problem for you really is that Nadu doesn't make the lands enter tapped. It just says put the land into play. So oftentimes this will be a basic or whatever, or a shock land entering untapped, meaning they have more chances to play more creatures. And since they're equipping for free, now it just sort of fuels itself. And even if a Nadu player doesn't kill you, you pass the turn to them, they get 14 Nadu triggers. I mean, okay, you're not dead. Good luck with this game, buddy. I think another card that's really cool that also does a similar thing is Unctus Grand Metatech. He can target your creatures basically for a Phyrexian blue mana. Doesn't really matter what he does, but you can pay Phyrexian blue and target one of your things. So that's not a ability that requires life, so I can start chaining it on my creatures twice at a time to get more lands in play, to then play more creatures, to then trigger Nadu.
I mean, that's just really nasty, though. I mean, I love Unctus to begin with, but this is extra spicy in this deck. The other one is Displacer Kitten. When you cast non-creatures, you can flicker creatures on the battlefield. Displacer Kitten is just such a good card all around, but I think it really shines in Nadu.
I mean, the absolute heartbreaker is when you think that they're running out of Nadu triggers, and then they play Displacer Kitten and they flicker Nadu, and it's like, oh, this is my brand new Nadu. All of my creatures now have. When this creature becomes target spell, really got another card. It's like, oh no. And then at that point, feel free to concede. Now, one of the things Nadu does need to continue to go off is creatures hitting the battlefield. And since Nadu puts lands onto the battlefield for free, the best way to do this is to find landfall creature makers like Scoot Swarm. Scoot Swarm can start making copies of itself, but it almost doesn't matter. It's kind of just gravy. You just want landfall, make a creature, because now every time you hit a land, which you're 50% to do, you get another creature, which gives you 2 more shots, 2 more 50%ers of lands, which then give you 2 more each time. So it's tough to pull out when Nadu pulls this combo off.
I mean, Scoot Swarm is so good in so many Simic decks to begin with, then it would fit. I'm not surprised it fits right at home in here. But Springheart and Nantuko, if you want to stay on the MH3 train, is also just Scoot Swarm, but a little bit different because you're going to create 1/1 green insect creature tokens if you don't pay the cost for it, which you're not going to because you want more creatures to target. And all of your lands are going to come down, make a creature, and if you have Scoot Swarm out, you're going to have 2 creatures, and that's just going to spiral out of control.
Yeah, I don't know if the quality of creature matters a ton. I think it falls into Nadu and not Nadu for the most part. So Nadu is a really tough one to play against, and I think this also is going to require some like preemptive strategy from you as you sit down to play against Nadu, because I don't think you can just keep a random 4-lander against this. I mean, there's a serious high chance that even against a non-blinged out casual Nadu that you get completely stomped if you kind of just pretend like everything's okay and you don't have to make really proactive plays in the first turn. We're back to Soul Shatter and Flare of Malice being like must-haves, because that gets around most of their like That gets around most of their like Veil of Summers and like Tameo safekeeping.
I mean, thank God this one can be sacrificed, though. But with so many Simic value decks, if you're going to churn through your entire library to begin with, you need a win con. How about Thassa's Oracle? I mean, this is the win con of kind of like sweatier decks, let's say. But it's going to be great because you're just going to say you win the game if you have more blue devotion than cards in your library. And with Nadu on the field, you're going to have so few cards in your library at the end of this.
Yeah, it's not very hard to assemble loops to say, well, like with Scoot Swarm specifically, hey, I made 16 Scoot Swarms. I'm going to Shuko all of them. Do you guys want to sit here for that, or do you guys want to just let me win? And most of the time you just let them win because, I don't feel like wasting my own time. That feels like, if you can't answer it, the game's literally over. You just save time. But yeah, that's what Thassa's Oracle's doing. This is sort of the least attractive Thassa's Oracle will ever look to Commander players and casual Commander players. They're just like, oh, okay. But I think Nadu is the real boogeyman here. Get them off the field. Their deck will be floundering around. Don't let them get to this point, because if you get into the Thassa's Oracle point, the problem is not Thassa's Oracle. You've been Nadu'd.
But a spicy way to close out the game is with Venerated Rot Priest. When your stuff becomes the target of spells, you can actually give poison counters to your opponents. So if you can just target your stuff 30 times or just have your opponents try and remove a bunch of your stuff, you can kill your opponents with poison, and I think that is a very spicy and flashy win.
Yeah, if you're going wide with a bunch of token makers, there's cards that say any number of target creatures, so you pay a fixed mana cost and then target everything, and then Venerated Rot Priest is like okay, we're going off, and then you just kind of win. What is our next dangerous commander?
Our next dangerous commander is one that you love to hate. It's Jetmir, Nexus of Revels.
Sure do.
1 white, red, green for a 5/4, which is a lot of attack on a very small guy. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and have vigilance as long as you control 3 or more creatures. Creatures you control also get +1/+0 and trample if you control 6 or more. Creatures get +1/+0 and double strike if you control 9 or more. This is the biggest overrun that you're going to staple onto one guy, life of the party, and no matter how many creatures you have, I mean, you're not going to play him till the last minute. You are going to be dealing so much damage all around.
That's the thing, is it's almost like you take Elishnorn and you remove all of the negative effects for your opponent, and you like quadruple the positive effects for you. So this is a very much, you will see Jetmir for 5 seconds. It is going to be the last 5 seconds of that Jetmir player's life, either because they win immediately, or you kill it, untap, and then send it all back at them and try to get them out of the game before they try to do it again. Yeah, Jetmir, super dangerous. I mean, it might be the most dangerous commander face up, because if I see it, I go, if that's in play, I'm dead, because they will have 8 other creatures or 12 other creatures or whatever. They're going to satisfy the condition, then play it. And, you can talk about throwing blocks, but there's nothing to do. Their 1/1s are attacking you for, let's see, 4. They're 4/1 double strikers now. So it doesn't matter what they have. Anything is going to blow you over like a twig in a hurricane.
I mean, even though this is a 4-mana commander and you can technically do it for 3 or more creatures, no one's going to be doing that. This is not a turn 4 play. This is going to be the last turn of the gameplay, and it's going to be oh, you guys only have a couple blockers? Well, here's 20 creatures swinging for 4/1 double strike. Guess you're dead, because there's trample too.
Yeah, so do not miss an opportunity to kill Jetmir. If they played on turn 4, take that as a stroke of luck and just get it off the field forever and ever. So they're gonna be playing things like Delighted Halfling. They want to get Jetmir out sooner, or more likely get their critical mass of 8 sooner, then have some leftover mana to play it. Plus, the bonus of this is that when they do decide to play Jetmir, it's not counterable. So that takes away like one piece of interaction you might have.
I mean, Delight Halfling is just, I feel like one of the go-to mana dorks nowadays ever since it's come out, but it really shines in here because people want to counter Jetmir so badly. There's also March of the Multitudes. X green, white for an instant with Convoke, but you're going to be making so many creatures already, so you can just pour all of your creature mana into it. You create X1/1s with Lifelink. I mean, if people are going to be swinging at you with Jetmir, which I feel like they're going to be, because it's either like kill or be killed, you're going to need a ton of Lifelink.
Yeah, so even if that Jetmir attack isn't fully lethal to the whole table, you're at 100,000 life, and things are looking pretty. I think another thing you're going to see in these decks are Army in a Can cards, so you might see Tendershoot Dryad, Illustrious Wanderglyph, and actually I'll throw in Dragon Brood Mother, that one, into the mix, because they all make a token every single upkeep. So if you just leave these cards in play for like 2 turns, well, there's your Jetmir crew right there, assembled all for just a couple mana.
I mean, I thought White Weenies was the way to have Army in a Can. No, Naya was really where it should have been, where I could branch out.
Naya's got the upkeep weenies, just like Moxfield's got the upkeep deck building. When you go to the best website on the planet, even better than YouTube.com, because we're not sponsored by YouTube. They have all of the decks you could ever want to build. You just pick your commander, pick your deck. You can paste from a URL. It's super easy. You can sort the deck however you want. And I think using Moxfield makes you 50% faster at deck building. I'll say it.
I think so too, because you can play test on Moxfield, you could tag cards, you can have a maybe board. I really love Moxfield, and if you want to check out any of our decks, you can see them on our profile. Go check it out.
So next up, we're going to throw down a pest infestation. We're going to be interacting with the game as we go, but also still ticking up to that magical number 9 or higher, preferably. And as we're going to be stifling you, we're going to be crewing creatures so that Jetmir hits that much harder.
I mean, I'm a big fan of this card, but it's recently gone down in price
Way down.
too because of the reprint in the breaking news or something. Anyways, I think that you should pick this up because it's gone down in price and because it's just so effective at making tokens and destroying a bunch of stuff on the field.
I know it went to 50 cents. It might even be on the uptick. It might even be a couple bucks now, but that's still less than it was like.
I mean, it was like, what, 15 at its highest or something like that?
Another card that'll go really good with Jetmir for a couple of reasons is Orin Frostfang. It's unfortunate that this card isn't more synergistic. Mainly what we want is to give all of our little rinky-dink tokens Death Touch and make it so that your opponents aren't going to block. And then we're going to profit a bunch of cards. It seems like, oh, well, Jetmir gives Trample and Double Strike, so they'll get to hit more of the time, Trample plus Death Touch, and twice as much with Double Strike. It's like, no, the game's over. That's Magical Christmas Land. You don't need to draw 50. They're actually dead.
They're dead, don't worry. Agate Instigator, this is one of my favorites from Bloomborough. When creatures come in, it deals 1 if you only have 1 out, but you can offspring it to have 2 damage go out per creature. And you're going to be making so many creatures with your Army in a Can and all of your March of the Multitudes and all of those little guys that just will grow way bigger later.
Yeah, as we play this mental game of chess, the Jetmir player knows that you want Jetmir dead. So they're going to put in some backup win conditions, maybe a few overruns, maybe a few Agate Instigators or a Perforos to make sure that when you kill Jetmir, they can still actually kill you. But this next one here, it's got to be one of the most dangerous pairings with Jetmir. It's Kutzel Malamet Exemplar. 1 green, white, 3/3. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. And whenever one or more creatures you control hits a player, if it's got higher power than its base power, you draw a card. So that's pretty cool if you have an early game Jetmir or some kind of other boost. But the real kicker at this that makes your opponents just go, oh, is that not being able to cast spells during your turn means that if you untap with Kutzel, it's open season for free Jetmirs that cannot be stopped in almost any way. I mean, short of like Otawara, that thing is going to kill everyone. So you're in an awkward spot now. You have to kill Kutzel. There's not a choice. But if that's the only removal spell you have, game over. They just kind of got you. They've outplayed you, and you need to maybe team up with other people at that point.
Kutzel, yet again, is a card that is slept on.
Mm-hmm.
LCI came and went, and this is a card that kind of slipped under the radar. I think maybe it's because it's a little unfun with the whole your opponents can't cast spells. Maybe that has like Dranith vibes or something. But this is a really good card. BZ plays it in CEDH. It does work.
It's tricky. It gets the job done, and it will catch people off guard every once in a while. All right, next, I think this one's funny because it's not dangerous in the typical way that you would think about it, but it certainly meets our definition for dangerous. Mia, what do we got?
We've got Kudo, King Among Bears, the Bear King. Green-white for a 2/2. Other creatures have base power and toughness 2/2 and are bears in addition to their other types. I mean, this is where Bear Kindred is coming along. People shifted their Iula decks to Kudo because there's an extra color in there and you can play a little bit more spice. But this is annoying. I've played against this pretty recently. Eric, I'm looking at you. And this, it's tough. I mean, whether you're paired up against a goblin deck that automatically becomes 2/2s and they're all swinging at you now, or your gigantic creatures deck like his Galto deck, his 12/12 becomes a 2/2, that is scary on all accounts.
Yeah, the danger here can come from if you are not ready to play against Kudo, if you don't keep an opening hand with Kudo in mind, or you don't give it any respect, your deck might not work at all. And this is especially true for like big bulky green decks that try to like throw around power and toughness. It's like, cool. My Galta, for example, 2 mana 2/2. Okay, now what? It's like I have to figure out something totally different. And it's like, oh, I can give my Overwhelming Stampede. It's like +2/+2. You've really got to get tricky. You need to figure out, I'm going to have to kill Kudo. But do you kill it right away so you can develop more? Or do you let it sit? Because then even when you kill it the first time, it's only 2 mana. So you have to factor in that they can probably just play it again. A lot of problems that come from Kudo. I think my favorite, though, is the Wombo combo everybody thought of. Elish Norn back from the commander spot in the 99 now because that's a Plague Wind static ability. Kudo makes them 2/2s. Elish Norn gives them -2/-2. Congratulations, you can't play creatures now.
I mean, that's a hard lock. It's not even a ton of mana setup because you're in green. You can easily do this turn 6, I'd say.
I mean, a 2-drop and a 7-drop, that's not crazy.
Yeah, you're ramping, you're doing kudo things. You have a board, and your board is going to be 4/4s at this point, and no one can keep a creature out? That's crazy.
I love it. We also have Champion of Lamholt in here. It's 1 green for a 1/1. Gets more counters when you play things. And the funniest part is that creatures with power less than its power can't block creatures you control. But when you take every single creature on the field and you squish them to be the exact same power, all Champion of Lamholt needs is one counter, and now none of your creatures can block.
I love this in there. I mean, this is going to be one of your win cons, right? You're just going to be swinging with a bunch of 2/2s that were previously 1/1s, and they can't do anything about it. The next card in here is a card draw engine. It's Welcoming Vampire. Creatures with power 2 or less, when they come in, you draw a card. Only once per turn, but that doesn't matter because with Kudo, that's going to be every single turn that you have this out, you're going to be drawing a card when you play a creature.
Yep, we also have Titania's Command, which can grow your team. Thematically put bears out, although that might be the worst mode, or go find your best lands if it's like Field of the Dead or something maybe. But the thing about Titania's Command and all these like these overrun-esque effects is that it's really backbreaking when Kudo starts putting counters on the team, because like, okay, Kudo player has a bunch of 4/4s, and I guess what everybody else has, a bunch of 2/2s. So now it's real tricky how you're going to get out from this, and they're going to also know that they need to protect Kudo, so you got to figure something out.
And the graveyard player did not mention the fact that you can exile someone's graveyard and gain a life for each card in there.
No, that's not real. That's not even on the card.
Please don't use that one.
You can use Felidar Retreat to put counters on your team, give them vigilance to make attacking even more frustrating for your opponents, though.
Or make 2/2s so you grow your board faster than everyone else's.
Your bear board.
Ha!
Bear board.
Kutzel, Malamet Exemplar is also making an appearance here because you're not going to be able to kill Kudo on your turn because your opponents can't cast spells, but also your tiny creatures are going to be bigger, which is going to trigger the draw a card clause on here, and you're going to be able to keep that handful very easily.
Yeah, everything you had that was 1/1 or 0/1 becomes 2/2 and now has power greater than their base power. It won't work if you have a 4/4 that gets shrunk to a 2/2, but you're Kudo. Why would you do that? This is another great way to ensure that the Kudo math applies to the game, because it is risky. I attack you with 7 2/2s and you have 7 4/4s that are turned into 2/2s. If you block everything and then kill Kudo, the Kudo player loses the game. So they got to account for that. Kutzel is a great way to do it. Also, Adaptive Automaton. Everything you have is bears, so everything gets +1/+1. And that minor of a stat boost normally isn't that exciting, but when everything's 2/2s, everything is multiplied. The advantage is multiplied.
Yeah, sure. But also, 3 mana to give your entire team this boost because they're all bears is going to be so important early in the game, because that's when you're going to be punching in for damage with all these little guys, because people are going to want to remove Kudo as quickly as possible. You better get in that damage while you can.
Absolutely. Let's go to our next commander. It's Stella Lee Wildcard. 1 blue red for a 2/4. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you can play that card. It's pretty generous, giving me a whole extra turn to play it. And you can tap her to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn.
That's easy.
A powerful ability to have no mana cost associated with. And I'm just going to go right into the first card because there are many like it. And if you see these cards plus Stella Lee, you lose the game. Refocus is our example. 1 in a blue, instant, untap target creature. Draw a card. What's the problem, you might ask? And why is Stella so dangerous, both in the command zone and on the battlefield? It's because when they cast 2 spells before this with whatever cheap nonsense, you can throw a Lotus Petal or a Gitaxian Probe, plenty of ways to cast spells for even no mana. But when Refocus is their 3rd or greater spell, they can target Stella Lee to untap, tap her to copy it with now 2 Refocuses on the stack. Then the copy will resolve, leaving 1 Refocus on the stack. Untap Stella Lee, draw you a card, and now there's a Refocus on the stack. Stella Lee's untapped, and you can just repeat it over and over and over to draw your entire deck, which I hear is good.
I think so too. Stella Lee is very spicy. There's also Galvanic Iteration in here. Blue-red for an instant. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You could choose new targets, and as flashback 1 blue-red, because Stella Lee can't always be out, but in the times that she can't be, you can still be copying your spells, whether from the graveyard with the flashback ability, or just from your hand for a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, so the thing you're going to be dealing with mostly in these Stella Lee games is really a do-or-die situation. If Stella Lee untaps, there's a really good chance you straight up lose the game. And I don't know how you get more dangerous than that. They say she's a wild card, but I think being a wild card has to do with unpredictability. she's almost too good at her job for that. I don't know if she qualifies as a wild card. It's like Thunderclap Drake is next. It's a 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flyer. It makes your instants and sorcery spells 1 cheaper, and you can sacrifice it to copy spells now for each time you've played your commander for the command zone. So like another backup way to just get those copies, because Stella Lee, she's going to be under fire.
I mean, this is such a good card. BZ and I have put this in multiple decks since it's come out. MH3 had so many bangers, but she's going to be cast at least a couple times if she keeps getting removed from the game, because she's going to be a high value target.
This might have even been Outlaws. You know, it's hard to
Was it?
It's hard to remember.
That's my bad, really. Then
Next up is Veyran, Voice of Duality. This is a Magecraft creature with it gets +1/+1, and if you casting or copying an instant or sorcery spell causes a ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. This does quite a few things, actually. It ensures that when you cast an instant as your second spell, Stella Lee will give you an extra impulse draw, but also in our infinite combo factory that has so many ways to go off and requiring almost nothing, Veyran will become infinitely large when you use Stella to copy something infinitely, and that brings us to Magecraft in general. Any Magecraft text that exists, be it Stormkiln Artist or Ral, Storm Conduit, will trigger infinitely when you copy Refocus or whatever card infinitely, giving you infinite of blah, blah, blah. Whatever thing you're going to get, that will probably end the game. Although, really, copying a spell infinite times and drawing your whole deck probably also ends the game.
I mean, you want to churn through your deck. This is where that commander shines, but you need to get to three instants or sorceries to get there. So one of them is Git Probe. Basically, this is free because you're going to pay 2 life for it, so you can use your mana to chain other spells so you can get that tap ability way faster.
Yeah, it's actually a card you might want to save and not play on turn 1 and just sort of go, all right, when I untap with Stella or when I give her haste or whatever, I can give 1 spell closer to that magical third spell, or really you only have to cast 2 before you win with your third spell. But that's what you're trying to do. Gutter Snipe is also another way to close out games when you draw your entire deck or combo in some certain way. Oftentimes you will end up with infinite of whatever you want, because that's just kind of how Izzet does things, you know? And then from that point, cast more spells, win more game. Very simple.
And Niv Mizzet Perun is also going to be going in here. I feel like he is the icon of Viz. I mean, Niv Mizzet, right? But you're going to be drawing your entire deck. That is going to be so much damage, 70 plus damage around. That could just kill your opponents right off the bat.
That's already at least 2 players dead. And, you know, if we're in the dream scenario, let's just say we drew 90 cards.
Yeah.
It's like turn 3, and we're just crushing people. So if we're talking danger, I know some people would be upset if we left off good old Tergrid, God of Fright. 3 black for a 4/5 menace. When your opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a card, whoop, you get to put it on the battlefield under your control. It's also her lesser-known alter ego, Tergrid's Lantern, 3 and a black for an artifact that taps to make a player lose 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. Or you can pay 3 and black to untap Tergrid's Lantern. Not the most irrelevant backside, honestly. It is nice to have. In some scenarios, Tergrid decks can go infinite, in which case you can play the Lantern side, untap it infinite, and kill your opponents that way. But mostly we're going to be talking about the Tergrid side.
I mean, that's the scariest one. That is the boogeyman of the format, or at least one of them. At least.
Yeah, if you don't respect Tergrid, you lose the game. Very, very, very spectacularly. You know, it's more flashy than if I went, oh, Stella Lee, copy, blah, 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 you guys are dead because Goldfish, etc. It's like, no, discard your whole hand, give me that, and then I'm going to attack you with it, and you just feel it. You're like, oh, man, I got destroyed.
Speaking of discarding your whole hand, Dark Deal is one of these signature cards in here. Each player discards all the cards in their hand, then draws that many -1. But when you discard them, they're all going to come back onto your side if Tergrid is out.
Yeah, usually my play pattern, if someone resolves Tergrid into Dark Deal, is I will concede the game because there's just no coming back from it. You're going to have some kind of monumental board wipe like a Farewell, and even then you're back to 0, and all you did was answer all your own cards. So, you know, you discarded 4, you drew 3, you don't have any control of what they are, they might suck. That's the thing about Tergrid, it's tough.
It's nasty.
I mean, even if in this scenario you have a Farewell in your hand, it's now gone, right? You have to, like, luckily draw into it. So it is almost impossible to come out from under a Dark Deal. Smaller, but still deadly. Smallpox, it makes everybody lose 1, discard 1, sacrifice 1, and sacrifice 1 creature and sacrifice 1 land. So the Tergrid player is up 3 lands, you are down 3 cards in your hand, and you're down 3 creatures, which Tergrid now has all for 2 mana, and these are the type of cards that they can easily go turn 6, you know, they got enough mana, they get a few ramps, maybe a Jet Medallion, and they go, all right, Turgid Dark Deal or Turgid Smallpox.
I mean, it's so nasty, too, because I feel like the land is insult to injury. Turgid would be good if it said anything that got discarded just went onto your field minus lands. Like, I'm sure that would still be a boogeyman. But lands, it's like, okay, kill off one of your lands and also I'll be getting it. That is just so insulting.
Yeah, I mean, actually, scratch what I said about Farewell, because you can't even it out. You still have to deal with all of the extra lands on the Turgid set player side. So it's like, sure, everything's gone. You have 4 lands, 4 lands, 4 lands, and 12 lands.
Rankle, Master of Pranks, is also going to be in here. When he connects with combat damage, you're going to either sacrifice a creature each opponent. They're either going to be discarding a card or drawing a card and losing 1 life, which they are never going to be doing because you're going to be getting everything they discard and sacrifice.
Yeah, every once in a while, maybe Turgid will do it, and that's how you know you're really losing, because that just means Turgid wants to give you more fodder to later discard. So you better hope to God they're not activating that last one of Rankle, or you've already lost. But yeah, Rankle's a great way to put it out, like spend your mana, get a thing on board, and have it so that when you play Turgid, there is an immediate effect that they don't have to spend mana on. It just makes it all that much harder to come out from the first couple Turgid triggers. Sangromancer is a really funny one because now whenever they're doing those things that you want to be doing, you gain 3 life for each one. It almost is overkill, but I think it should still go in.
I mean, Sangromancer, I've seen just do work in decks already. You have it in Queen Marchesa. It's always such an annoying card in there. Just to think, if I also had to be discarding my hand every single time to, like, multiple dark deals, if people are, like, chaining those or whatever, I would be. So I'm like, okay, I'm done here. I think this is enough.
Who's ready for game 2? I also think about Death Cloud, aka
Big Fart?
AKA Big Fart, yes. It's X, black, black, black. Each player loses X, discards X, sacrifices X creatures, sacrifices X lands. It's Smallpox with X on it. So if you are foolish enough to let them untap with Turgid, and they play this, you're 1,000% dead, because not only do they have all your stuff, you have 0 resources. You have no hand and no lands. What are you supposed to do with that?
Lands, man, that's just so nasty. Like, Turgid, you are up there on the most hated, the most dangerous for good reason. Cursed Marauder or something from MH3 because it makes everyone sacrifice a non-token creature. That is, I feel like having a bunch of dirtly little tokens is one of the ways people get around like some Turgid things, but this specifically says, no, you're not allowed to do that. Sacrifice your real creatures only.
Yeah, I need a card that you put into your deck, not a 0/1 plant token. I think one of the only ways to sort of like save yourself from getting a Turgid trigger is to like sacrifice your commander, but how good does that feel?
Never good, especially if it's like a 4+ mana commander.
Yeah, that just feels like losing with extra steps. We also have Flare of Malice in here. I haven't talked about this card in Soul Shatter all day. This is the deck that plays it, and now, especially with this one, I can play Turgid and immediately have a follow-up. Like if I go Turgid, then attack with Rankle, trigger it, then sack Rankle to play Flare of Malice, we're done here. It's over.
Flare of Malice is so good. You want to be sacking stuff in black for the most part anyways, and then you make everyone else sacrifice. It's good in most black decks, but Turgid absolutely eats this up for breakfast.
Yeah, so Turgid's going to be answering all the other problematic, dangerous commanders on here. And then
except Slicer, of course.
Right, but Turgid also does die to Flare of Malice most of the time, so buy your Flare of Malices, I guess. But if you want to know about risky commanders, not dangerous, but super risky for you, how about this video right here, where you might learn a new commander.